window. Philip hurried across the open to the cabin occupied by himself and MacDougall, the engineer. He tried the door, but it was barred. Then he knocked loudly, and continued knocking until a light appeared within. He heard the Scotchman's voice, close to the door. "Who's there?" it demanded. "None of your business," retorted Philip, falling into the error of a joke at the welcome sound of MacDougall's voice. "Open up!" A bar slipped within. The door opened slowly. Philip thrust himself against it and entered. In the pale light of the lamp he was confronted by the red face of MacDougall, and a pair of little eyes that gleamed menacingly. And on a line with MacDougall's face was an ugly-looking revolver. Philip stopped with a sudden uncomfortable thrill. MacDougall lowered his gun. "Lord preserve us, but that's the time you almost drew a perforation!" he exclaimed. "It isn't safe to cut up in these diggings any more. Not with Sandy MacDougall." He held out a hand with a relieved laugh, and the two men shook in a grip that made their fingers ache. "Is this the way you welcome all of your friends, Mac?" MacDougall shrugged his shoulders and laid his gun on a table in the center of the room. "Can't say that I've got a friend left in camp," he said, with a curious grimace. "What in thunder do you mean, Phil? I've tried to reason something out of it, but I can't." Philip was hanging up his cap and coat on one of a number of wooden pegs driven into the long wall. He turned quickly. "Reason something out of what?" he said. "Your instructions from Churchill," replied MacDougall, picking up a big, black-bowled pipe from the table. Philip sat down with a restful sigh, crossed his legs, loaded his pipe, and lighted it. "Thought I made myself lucid enough, even for a Scotchman, Sandy," he said. "I learned at Churchill that the big fight is going to be pulled off mighty soon. It's about time for the fireworks. So I told you to put the sub-camps in fighting shape, and arm every responsible man in this camp. There's going to be a whole lot of gun work before you're many days older. Great Scott, man, don't you understand now? What's the matter?" MacDougall was staring at him as if struck dumb. "You told me to arm the camps?" he gasped. "Yes. I sent you full instructions 2 weeks ago." MacDougall tapped his forehead suspiciously with a stubby forefinger. "You're mad, or trying to pull off a poor brand of joke," he exclaimed. "If you're dreaming, come out of it. Look here, Phil," he cried, a little heatedly. "I've been having a hell of a time since you left the camp, and I want to talk seriously." It was Philip who stared now. He fairly thrust himself upon the engineer. "Do you mean to say you didn't get my letter telling you to put the camps in fighting shape?" "No, I didn't get it," said MacDougall. "But I got the other." "There was no other." MacDougall jumped to his feet, darted to his bunk, and came back a moment later with a letter. He thrust it almost fiercely into Philip's hands. A sweat broke out upon his face as he saw its effect upon his companion. Philip's face was deadly pale when he looked up from the letter. "My God! You haven't done this?" he gasped. "What else could I do?" demanded MacDougall. "It's down there in black and white, isn't it? It charges me to outfit 6 prospecting parties of 10 men each, arm every man with a rifle and revolver, victual them for 2 months, and send them to the points named there. That letter came 10 days ago, and the last party, under Tom Billinger, has been gone a week. You told me to send your very best men, and I have. It has fairly stripped the camp of the men we depended upon, and there are hardly enough guns left to kill meat with." "I didn't write this letter," said Philip, looking hard at MacDougall. "The signature is a fraud." The letter which I sent to you, revealing my discoveries at Churchill, has been intercepted and replaced by this. Do you know what it means?" MacDougall was speechless. His square jaw was set like an iron clamp, his heavy hands doubled into knots on his knees. "It means fight," continued Philip. "Tonight, tomorrow, at any moment now. I can't guess why the blow hasn't fallen before this." He quickly related to MacDougall the chief facts he had gathered at Fort Churchill. When he had finished, the young Scotchman reached over to the table, seized his revolver, and held the butt end of it out to Philip. "Pump me full of lead. For God's sake, do, Phil," he pleaded. Philip laughed and gripped his hand. "Not while I need a few fighters like yourself, Sandy," he objected. "We're on to the game in time. By tomorrow morning we'll be prepared for the war. We haven't an hour, perhaps not a minute, to lose. How many men can you get hold of tonight whom we can depend upon to fight?" "10 or a dozen, no more. The road gang that we were expecting up from the Grand Trunk Pacific came 3 days after you started for Churchill, 28 of 'em. They're a tough-looking outfit, but devilish good workers. I believe you could hire that gang to do anything. They won't take a word from me. It's all up to Thorpe, the foreman who brought 'em up, and they won't obey an order unless it comes through him. Thorpe could get them to fight, but they haven't anything to fight with, except a few knives. I've got 8 guns left, and I can scrape up 8 men who'll handle them for the glory of it. Thorpe's gang would be mighty handy in close quarters, if it came to that." MacDougall moved restlessly, and ran a hand through his tawny hair. "I almost wish we hadn't invited that bunch up here," he added. "They look to me like a lot of dollar thugs, but they work like horses. Never saw such men with the shovel and pick. And fight? They've cleaned up on a half of the men in camp. If we can get Thorpe—" "We'll see him tonight," interrupted Philip. "Or, to be correct, this morning. It's 1 o'clock. How long will it take to round up our best men?" "Half an hour," said MacDougall promptly, jumping to his feet. "There are Roberts, Henshaw, Tom Cassidy, Lecault, the Frenchman, and the 2 St. Pierre brothers. They're all crack gunmen. Give 'em each an automatic, and they're worth 20 ordinary men." A few moments later MacDougall extinguished the light, and the 2 men left the cabin. Philip drew his companion's attention to the dimly lighted window of the cabin to which he had followed the stranger a short time before. "That's Thorpe's," said the young engineer. "I haven't seen him since morning. Guess he must be up." "We'll sound him first," said Philip, starting off. At MacDougall's knock there was a moment's silence inside, then heavy footsteps, and the door was flung open. Sandy entered, followed by Philip. Thorpe stepped back. He was of medium height, yet so athletically built that he gave the impression of being 2 inches taller than he actually was. He was smooth-shaven, and his hair and eyes were black. His whole appearance was that of a person infinitely superior to what Philip had expected to find in the gang foreman. His first words, and the manner in which they were spoken, added to this impression. "Good evening, gentlemen." "Good morning," replied MacDougall, nodding toward Philip. "This is Mr. Whittemore, Thorpe. We saw your light and thought you wouldn't mind a call." Philip and Thorpe shook hands. "Just in time to have a cup of coffee," invited Thorpe pleasantly, motioning toward a steaming pot on the stove. "I just got in from a long hike out over the new road bed. Been looking the ground over along the north shore of the Gray Beaver, and was so interested that I didn't start for home until dark. Won't you draw up, gentlemen? There are mighty